Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. You have Molly Landers and Stephanie Anderson with you from the Alumni Engagement Team. We're super excited to be here with you tonight to talk about student engagement. And we hope that even if some of these areas you and your organization have already mastered, that you'll take away maybe just even one new idea from the information that we present tonight. So just a couple of housekeeping things. So this presentation will be pretty short and sweet, and so we'll keep all of our questions to the end, but you can, throughout the presentation, ask questions in the chat box, and we'll get to those at the end and have some time for questions. We are recording this, so if you have any board members who weren't able to join us tonight, but you know that they wanted to hear what we had to say, we will share the link for the recording in our next volunteer newsletter. So let's get started. So in this presentation, we're going to kind of take an approach to really look throughout the year at ways that you can interact and connect with your students. So we're going to start with summer send-offs. Summer send-offs, of course, happen kind of starting right now through early August. And we have a few things for you to consider in this area. Just like many of our other events, there are tons of factors to consider. And there's not one right way to host a student send-off or really any of the ideas that we discussed tonight. And it's all about what's the best fit for your organization and for your community. Just a few things to consider. You want to cater to your crowd. So do you want to invite just students and their families, or do you want to make this a chapter-wide event? Do you want it to be a come one, come all barbecue at a bigger venue, or do you want to have a quick dessert social? We have some organizations, I know Larry Simon's on the call tonight, we have some that do it in a park. We have some that do it, have their send-offs at someone's home because they just don't have very many students coming from their area, and that works for them. And then even in some of our West Coast chapters, we have beach parties, and so the San Diego chapter has a cruise event that they have for their send-off as well. Excuse me. And then timing-wise, you really want to think about what's going on in your community. Think about when high school graduations are happening. So that's going to look different for all of our organizations. So you want to consider that students will probably, for this year, for example, start coming to campus around August 10th. So the last weekend that you're going to want to have a send-off would be the weekend of August 4th. But anywhere between now and then, depending on what else you have going on your chapter calendar, what else you have going on in the community, is kind of free game. Just another FYI, you don't have to plan around summer welcome by any means, but the last summer welcome session this year is July 11th, I believe. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then finally, promotion of student send-offs. Just like many of our other chapter events, you want to tell us that date ASAP so we can start our promotion timeline. We can send out postcards to these families on your behalf. We can also email the students and the parents. So for the most part, we have most of our parent emails for students, not all, but most. And then depending on the size of your group, if you want to do personal outreach through phone calls to invite them to this event, that's an option as well. So what should your program look like at a summer send-off? What should you do when everybody gets there? Aside from connecting the students with your chapter, we really want you to connect the students with each other. So you might have an icebreaker like Mizzou Bingo to help them get to know one another, and we have copies of Mizzou Bingo that we can certainly share with you. We have swag for the students. Each year we try to find a new piece of swag to give to the incoming students, and can pack your activity boxes with those as well. And we can also work with you to have a campus presence there, either in addition to or instead of your chapter liaison if one of us can't make it, whether it's someone from the Office of Admissions or an administrator or someone from the Mizzou Families team over in Student Affairs. This could also be an opportunity to invite any current students you know, or maybe your current your current scholars to share their Mizzou experience. So that could be a good connection as well. But ultimately, we want you to make all of your students feel special. It's totally fine to recognize your scholars at send-offs, but we just want to be sure that all of your students feel welcomed and recognized. And then this is also a good opportunity to connect with parents. So connecting your students' parents to Mizzou through their local chapter organization, even if they aren't alumni. This is especially beneficial for our groups who are far away from campus. The chapter can be the parents' link to campus, and they can feel reassured knowing that they're alumni in their hometown. And keep in mind that you don't have to be an alum to be an MAA member. So there's potential for a soft ask there. They seem really interested or connected or are connecting with the chapter. And then finally, stay in touch with these students and their families. At the event, ask for their cell phones and email addresses so that you can stay in touch with them throughout the year personally as well, and then encourage them to follow your organization's social media accounts as well.
You've got Stephanie here now, and while Molly just touched on the student send-offs and their focus on the broad engagement of students from your area, I'm going to transition and talk a little bit about smaller, more special population of students. We know that many of our alumni chapters groups have alumni scholars. So in this next segment, I'm going to talk about ways to steward your scholarship recipients. And so the first thing, which may seem totally obvious, is to tell your scholar the good news. Have someone from the local chapter, whether it's the chapter president, the scholarship chair, or somebody from the committee, or somebody from the board, reach out and tell the student that they were selected for the scholarship. Most groups already do a really good job of this, so again, it may seem super obvious, but we just wanted to reiterate its importance. As local volunteers, you are the front line and illustrate that there are Mizzou alumni in their hometown who are there for them and supporting them. So we really want to encourage you to take the fun job of notifying the scholars. MAA will send follow-up communication with all the award details and disbursement information and make sure that financial aid gets it. But it's so much more impactful to learn that you are receiving a Mizzou scholarship from a local Mizzou alum instead of like a dry university email or letter. So how you actually notify them is up to you. You can call them or send emails or both. And we've even had some groups that like to notify them in person. This year, one chapter went to the student's place of work at Subway. The student worked at Subway to give him the good news. A small group of board members showed up with pom-poms and surprised him with a scholarship announcement. They kind of made it a little spirit rally. And they actually filmed his reaction, and it was so fun to see the student get so excited about all the Mizzou spirit and enthusiasm and support that the local chapter showed them. So that's really great. And then one more secondary benefit to telling them in person, having a real local person deliver the news can also help with the alternate process. If you contact a student and they tell you that they've decided to attend somewhere else, we can move on and offer it to an alternate right then, instead of waiting until May when the enrollment deposit list comes out and they're due. And so not only is it more fun to tell them in person, but it also expedites the process and makes it a little bit smoother. So once you notify your student, it's time to celebrate. And just want to reiterate, there is no right way to celebrate. Some of our groups will host formal scholarship banquets and invite all alumni from the area to attend and celebrate their scholar. And another option, though, is to just keep things casual and have a few members from the board or scholarship committee take the scholar and their family to lunch or coffee or ice cream. It really doesn't have to be anything major or sophisticated. Having that in-person celebratory experience does a lot for building that affinity to Mizzou, both the chapter and especially the chapter or organization. So something to keep in mind. And then in a similar vein, look for ways to recognize your scholar, whether it's sending a news release to the local paper or posting about it on social media. Once you confirm that they are planning to attend Mizzou, ask for a photo or short bio that you can share with the community and social media followers. Some groups will also opt to participate at high school award assemblies for their scholars. It takes a little bit of legwork on the volunteers' part to figure out the dates and times and all the details, especially if you have multiple scholars from different high schools. But if you want to go this route, MAA is always happy to provide certificates. And we're actually happy to provide certificates if you want to present them at any sort of function, whether it's a local chapter function or some other sort of way. So we're always happy to do that. Just let us know. And I've been primarily referencing current scholars, those who are either currently receiving or about to receive the scholarship funds. However, I also encourage you to keep in touch with your past scholars. As Molly mentioned, they are great programming. So continue to check on them and invite them back as special guests to give an update and share about their experience on campus. Alumni always love hearing from current students. So it's always good to keep that connection with them. And I've mentioned it before, but it's all about building that relationship between the scholar and your local organization. There is no one thing that you absolutely have to do or one right thing to do. But one of these ideas, and plenty that we haven't mentioned, can have a large impact on making the student feel connected. So we view these students as potential future volunteers, and anything that you do now can leave a positive impression and hopefully make them want to volunteer and give back once they graduate.
Now we're going to shift even more so toward current students. And one way you can connect with current Mizzou students, even if they're not originally from your area, is through Mizzou Alternative Breaks. So I'm going to give kind of just a little overview of what MAB is. So our Mizzou Alternative Breaks program is one of the largest programs of its kind in the country, but the program is completely student-led, meaning all the participants who go on these trips, the site leaders who plan them, the executive board members who oversee the management of the trips are Mizzou undergrad or grad students. So they serve communities in need throughout the state, throughout the country, and internationally as well. The majority of the trips fall during winter and spring break, but they also happen over Thanksgiving, summer, and even weekend breaks, especially here in the state of Missouri. So over the last few years, our MAA team has become increasingly connected with the Mizzou Alternative Breaks team and their staff. And we receive lists of these trips each semester to see where these students are going and kind of receive updates throughout the semester in terms of what their needs are. So this is not an opportunity to necessarily serve with the students at their locations. They're going to do that on their own, but it's rather a time to connect, to be a Mizzou connection point to them on their trip. So oftentimes they're looking for housing opportunities in the area or even on their way to their trip. And by housing opportunities, I do not mean hotels or anything fancy. They are literally looking for somewhere sometimes to lay a sleeping bag and their pillow. So oftentimes that looks like a church or a community center, and we'll have alumni find those locations for them in their cities. But we have had some alums help or host them in their homes as well. You certainly do not have to do that at all. Finding the locations or helping them find the locations is just as helpful. And then when they're in your area for the trip, hosting them for dinner. So we had quite a few groups do this over spring break with MAB trips around the country. I know Memphis, I think maybe New York, Denver has done it a few times as well. All have hosted groups of students. And this is usually a group somewhere around 10 to 15. So definitely a bigger group, but easy to host dinner with or have dinner with while they're there. Let's see. Consider too, even if you're not an out-of-state chapter, even if you're an in-state chapter, Mizzou Alternative Breaks has a new partnership with MU Extension to send groups to every county in Missouri, so 114 counties. So they're already doing these weekend trips around the state, but I think we'll see even more of those. So that could be a new opportunity for some of our in-state chapters. And if you're interested kind of logistically in this, give us a heads up. As I said, we kind of know where they're going each semester and can tell you if you're along a route or if you are the end point, you are the destination, and we can get you connected accordingly. And sometimes it's not that we let chapters know or let organizations know this far in advance. Sometimes it's, you know, a month out and they still haven't found that housing option and they might need a little help. So it's really throughout the year. But our connection with MAB really just demonstrates the strength and the power of the Mizzou family. And we really hope that these students will eventually be alumni who give back as well. So as this MAB affinity grows and grows, we're trying to look at other service opportunities that we can connect these students and future alumni with through MAB.
Okay, and to wrap things up, I just want to share a few ideas on how to stay in touch with students in general. So these are pretty broad practical applications that you could apply in many different situations. So some of you live close and others are literally halfway across the country. But when you are back on campus, make an effort to meet up with the students. It does not have to be formal or complicated. You can meet up and treat them to pizza at Shakespeare's or ice cream at Buck's or Sparky's. And over the years, we've tried to find ways to include students into official Leaders Weekend programming. To be honest, we haven't quite found that sweet spot yet about what's the appropriate level of involvement or engagement within Leaders Weekend, but we're going to keep looking and brainstorming and trying to find appropriate ways to include them. However, you can also bring them together informally while you're in town for Leaders Weekend. When you're back, it's a great chance to check in and just see how the first month of school is going for those students. Something as simple as meeting up for coffee can be really meaningful. And I know the feasibility of this will vary based on the size and number of students from your area. In areas like Florida or Portland, where we only get really a few students, you could easily invite everybody from the area to get together. Cities like St. Louis or Kansas City or Chicago, there's no way that that would be possible at all. So in those instances where you have a whole bunch of students, maybe look at just inviting the scholars to meet up. Like I said, there's no right answer. You just have to do what works best for your group, and trial and error is encouraged. If you try something and it doesn't work, just try something new. We're gonna find something that sticks eventually. Another idea is to celebrate those on the Dean's List. So every semester, the MU News Bureau announces the list of students who make the Dean's List within each school and college. You can search by name and then county within each state, so it's really easy to navigate. And actually, Jean from our Greater Peoria chapter, they are a group that does this, and so I want to give them a shout out. They will take the Dean's List, the list of students from each semester from those that live in the area, and then features them in their chapter newsletter. So you could easily do the same thing in your own newsletter, or to do like a shout out on social media. It's a small touch, but it's really nice for students to know that Tigers back home are watching and rooting for them. And if your group has an event planned while students are home for break or holidays, and it's appropriate for them to be there, invite students. Full disclosure, we've had a few groups that have tried to host student-focused events during breaks, so where the student is like the audience would be made up of students, and they just haven't quite yielded the results that we had hoped for. And the feedback seems to be that when students are home, they just kind of want to check out and take a break from the zoo and not have to worry about networking or all of the on stuff you do while you're on campus. They just want to be home and relaxing. But if you're already doing something like a watch party or a fun outing to a hockey game or a baseball game or something like that, you can definitely make sure that the students are invited and know about the opportunity. And it's been woven throughout this entire presentation, but that personal touch of reaching out and checking in can be so meaningful. You don't want to pester them to death, so maybe just once or twice this semester. And even if they don't respond, it's okay, don't take it personally. Students are busy and are notorious for not checking emails or returning phone calls. But you just never know if a student is struggling with something, and your positive note or inquiry to check in will make the difference and can be a good resource for them. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into some questions. So If you have a question, you can open up the chat box and enter it there, and we are happy to field those, or if you have other comments or ideas that you want to enter, you can do that too. But to get us started, we did have one question about how can a chapter or organization use its MAA allocation to support student engagement? So what types of expenses are actually allowed for that kind of thing? And I'll let Molly answer this one.
Yeah, so with student send-offs in particular, it's pretty straightforward. You know, this is similar to any other chapter event where you might be reimbursed for expenses from the event. But we wanted to make it clear too that even if it's not a chapter event like that, but it's still student engagement. If you host a group of MAB students, for example, you can use your allocation for that and be reimbursed, and that's not a problem at all. So just consider that as you're having or kind of trying to create some student engagement touch points, that your chapter allocation or organization allocation is available for those opportunities.
Yeah. And if you have specific questions or ideas and you're like, oh, do you think this will work? Feel free to just reach out and ask your liaison. And I think we're always happy to give feedback or insight into that.
I see that Matt Kruger from Northeast Florida is asking where this video will be available to those who couldn't attend. So the link to the video will be in our next volunteer newsletter for sure, but always feel free to reach out to your liaisons as well. So we can definitely give that to anybody who needs it. Don't believe you received a notification for MAB this year, and that may be because there wasn't a visit, but we could definitely check on that and see what's coming up as well.
Mm-hmm. So like Molly said, the MAB stuff, they really do it throughout the year, but the bulk of it falls over winter and spring break. And so once we get those lists of locations that they go to, we'll try to give you all a heads up to at least either connect you with the students who are leading those trips, or give you a heads up that they may be reaching out to you sooner, just to make you aware of those.
Any other questions for us right now?
All right, it looks like if you have any questions that can come up after the fact, you know how to get a hold of us, and our contact information is here on the screen as well. Or you can always reach out to your own personal liaison. But we so appreciate you all tuning in. And as Molly said, we'll have this this one coming up. One last question: do you have an agenda for upcoming webinars? Yes, our next one is scheduled for June 6th, and it's going to be about social media. So you can look for more information. We usually try to do them once a month, and they're usually like the first or second Thursday of the month. It fluctuates a little bit based on our schedules, but we always have the upcoming dates in the volunteer newsletter that goes out monthly, and try to do some additional promotion pretty close to it so that you all have a heads up and we have any last minute folks who want to register. But yeah, the next one, June 6th, and it'll be on social media and how your organizations can make the most of it.
All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.
And MIZ.